the latest of our FrenchEntrée webinars. My name is Zoe Smith. I'm digital editor of FrenchEntrée, and I'm joined today by Diana from French Connections HCB for a special edition webinar, which is entirely devoted to French visas and residency. So if you are a non-EU citizen looking to move to France, to retire to France, or to spend time at your second home in France, this webinar is for you. Before we get started today, we are recording today's webinar, and it will be available to stream for free on our website and over on our FrenchEntrée YouTube channel. For those of you that aren't familiar with FrenchEntrée, we are part of the France Media Group, who are specialist publishers covering all aspects of French life and culture, from travel to gastronomy to buying property. FrenchEntrée itself has been a leading resource for French property buyers for almost 20 years now. Not only do we help buyers to find their dream property in France, we also help and advise with every aspect of the property buying and moving to France journey. Now, if you are looking to buy a property in France, you may also be interested in our French Property News magazine, which you can subscribe to over on the FrenchEntrée website. And you can also buy our full range of magazines, calendars, and gift cards at francemedia.shop. If you're based in the UK, you might also want to sign up to our French property exhibition, which will be held in London in January next year. This is a really great opportunity to come and meet us all in person, browse thousands of French properties, and attend seminars from a wide range of industry leaders and experts. Today's guest, French Connections HCB, will be there, and we'll also have experts covering subjects from buying property, tax, legal and mortgages, to visas, healthcare, currency exchange, and many more topics. Entry is free, and you can register for tickets on FrenchEntrée.com or FrenchPropertyExhibition.com. And if you missed any of that, just send us an email at webinar@FrenchEntrée.com, and we'll fill you in on everything you need to know. So let's jump into today's Moving to France Visas and Residency webinar. I'm joined today by Diana from French Connections HCB, who is a bilingual relocation specialist who helps individuals worldwide make the move to France. So big thank you to Diana for taking part today. And Diana, if you'd like to turn your camera on now, please, and join us. Thank you.
Hello.
So, hi, Diana. So we're aiming for a runtime of around 1 hour today, and I'm going to put as many of your most frequently asked questions on visas and the residency process to Diana. A big thank you to all of you who sent in your questions in advance. I have been through all of them. There were a lot, and I hope that we're going to cover all the relevant subjects in today's webinar. We're going to split this up into 3 sections: traveling to France, becoming resident in France, and visa applications and eligibility. And I'll also be putting any live questions that you have to Diana along the way. I can see that you're already firing questions in the Q&A box. And you can continue putting your questions in the Q&A box on your screen at any time throughout. And if you're watching this on Facebook, you can leave a comment and one of my colleagues will pick that up. We'll also take a quick break to conduct a few quick polls throughout, just to make sure you're all still paying attention. And finally, if we don't get around to your question today, or your question is too complicated to address in this webinar, please do be assured that we have read them all, and we will make sure that we forward those questions to French Connections HCB after the webinar. One quick disclaimer before we get started. It is important to remember that all visa applications are considered on an individual basis by the French Immigration Department. So there are no guarantees that your visa application will be approved. However, the point of this webinar is to help you understand the rules, the application process, and the eligibility criteria to maximize your chances of getting the French visa that you need. And with this in mind, if you do want the peace of mind of having an expert like Diana handling your visa application, then do please get in touch with us at webinar@FrenchEntrée.com, and we will pass on your request to her. Okay, well, that's more than enough from me. So without further ado, I would like to ask Diana to just introduce herself and tell us a little bit about French Connections and what services they provide.
Thank you so much, Zoe, and hello and welcome to everyone who are with us today. So I'm Diana. I have a pleasure to be part of this amazing team, French Connection HCB, for over 3 years as a relocation specialist. We are a team of French and English bilingual relocation specialists, as you already mentioned, and we are very proud to call France our home. Our dedicated hands-on team is built by professionals who can help with applying for the right type of visa, understanding French taxation, helping you to set up a company, registering or buying a car for you, and even help you to find your future dream location here in France.
Great. Thank you, Diana. So we're going to jump straight into our questions. And the first ones are all looking at the rules for traveling to France. So this is mostly going to affect tourists and second homeowners. So not people who actually want to move and live in France or become resident in France. So let's start with a simple question, although one that is never quite as simple as it seems. Can you briefly explain the rules for non-EU citizens for traveling to France? And of course, this now includes British citizens after Brexit as well. How does the 90 out of 180-day rule work?
Absolutely. So the 90 and 180-day rule is very confusing for everyone. So it's absolutely normal if you don't understand it, how it works. Unfortunately, where people usually get wrong is that they think that you have the 90-day, which corresponds to 3 months. So you come for 3 months, then you go back to your home country for 3 months, and then you come back again for 3 months. It doesn't quite go that way. Basically, what you have to do is that every time when you're planning to come back to France, you have to look at it retrospectively and check in the past 180 days how many days you have spent in France. Now, fear not, the calculation can be actually helped. Online, you can find a Schengen visa calculator. You really just have to type in Google search or whichever you are using, and then there you will be able to put your entry and then your out date as well, and then the calculator can help you to make sure that you are not exceeding your 90 days here in France.
Great. Okay. Yeah, we've had a lot of questions come in about this, and we do have an article over on FrenchEntrée.com that does explain the 90 out of 180-day rule. So you can just type that in the search box on the website, and that should come up. But just to be clear, because I know people ask me this all the time, the 180-day period you count backwards from the day that you either arrive in France or you leave France, or the Schengen zone.
So the day when you are planning to come to France. So every time when you plan to come to France, you look at backwards and you look at that in the past 180 days, how many days you have spent in France. And where the calculator is also quite helpful, because I guess everybody can count until 90, but where it's already very helpful is that if you have used your 90-day, the calculator can let you know what is the next date when you actually can re-enter France again.
Great. Okay. So yeah, anyone that has any questions on that, go and get one of those calculators. We do have a link to that calculator actually in the article as well. So, okay. So if I'm a non-EU citizen and I want to travel to France for longer than 90 days, but I don't want to move to France, what are my options?
Well, basically a 6 months long visa. So the 6 months long visa is quite comfortable. Also, actually, for those ones who do not want to calculate the 90 per 100 day as well, because this 6 months long visa allows you, it's a multiple entry visa, and it allows you to come and go as you please within that 6 months period of time. It has a start and it has an end date. So once it comes to an end, we kindly ask you to please go back to your respective country. But during that 6 months, you can absolutely enjoy France, and not just France actually, because this is a Schengen visa. And you can also actually enjoy the other European countries around.
Okay, and that's a temporary long stay visa.
It is a temporary visa. Okay. So basically, this is not something that you can change into further staying, or, well, obviously, if you come with a 6 months long visa, you don't necessarily want to become a resident. But if you change your mind, because it's a wonderful country and one of the region really actually took your breath away, then unfortunately still you cannot change it into another visa here in France, nor a residency permit. So in any case, with a 6 months long visa, you will need to go back to your home country. But then a good thing is that after you will be able to apply for a longer term visa, for a long-term visa, and you can come back if you decided that this is going to be your future in France.
And is there a period of time that I need to wait? If I have one 6 month visa, do I need to wait a certain period of time before I apply for another 6 month visa?
Yes, absolutely. So every time when you are applying for the same type of visa, basically, there is always a 6 months period of wait once it has expired. So you cannot immediately apply for a new one, unfortunately. Where you can apply for a new one is that when you are not applying for the same type of visa.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and how does the 90-day rule work in conjunction with this temporary long stay visa? Can I spend 90 days and then have a 6 month visa and then another 90 days and just spend the whole year in France? Does it work like that?
Yeah, actually, the good news is that you can mix and match in a certain way. The important is that you cannot prolong it or use it together. So for example, you can come with your 90-day option, then you have to go back home, then you can apply for a visa and come back. Or if you came with, for example, the 6 months long visa, and then once the visa comes to its end, then you return home. And then even on the following day, if you would like to, you can come back with the 90-day option. But all the time, you have to have a break in between. So you have to leave the country and then come back. So basically, for example, it's a really good option also for secondary homeowners because it allows them to spend a totality of 9 months in France. Obviously, this is something that it's not for this webinar. You just have to make sure that in terms of the financial aspect, the taxation aspects, you're going to respect not to spend more in France than becoming liable for taxation. That's all.
Yeah, and this is like, I will just briefly cover this. It isn't the subject of this webinar because we're looking at visas, but this is a really important caveat to know. If you do spend more than 183 days, I think it is, in France, generally speaking, you are classed as a tax resident in France. Now, there might be some exceptions to this, and we're not tax specialists or legal specialists, but it is really important to understand that, and it's quite a big misunderstanding that people have. We do have a great article over on FrenchEntrée.com. If you search for "Are you tax resident in France?" that will help you understand how this works. But yeah, generally speaking, you shouldn't be spending more than that in one calendar year. So just something to be really aware of. Okay, so what happens if I overstay the 90 days? Will I get a fine? Will I be allowed to return to France? What are the consequences for that?
Well, a lot of people are worried about that. First of all, why someone would overstay. The general reason why somebody is overstaying, because unfortunately something happened, they fallen ill. In that case, if you have a note from the doctor, there is no problem. You can leave the country without any problem. However, if you are just really forgot to calculate your days, then yes, what can happen is that because when you are entering the country, your passport is being registered. And then when you're leaving the country, obviously they can see in the system how many days you have spent in here. They can actually fine you when you are leaving the country itself, but they will not restrict you to return.
Okay. Okay, but I assume if you were to do that multiple times, there might be some, would that be a problem if you then wanted to get a visa or something? Possibly.
It would be great to avoid to do that multiple times.
Yeah,
yes.
Of course, we always recommend that people do follow the rules, of course, but that is reassuring to know if you do make a genuine mistake, you know, it's not going to mean.
Absolutely. If it's a genuine mistake, it's absolutely fine. But still, France is a very regulated country, so it's better not to play around with those things.
Okay, great. So another question I get asked a lot, and I've had a lot of questions sent in on this subject. If I'm a non-EU citizen, but I'm traveling with my spouse, who is a French or an EU citizen, does the 90-day rule apply to me?
Yes, absolutely. So that's also something that it's good to clarify, and thank you for that question. A lot of people think that just because we are married to a European or a French spouse, it actually grants us exactly the same rights as what our spouse would have. Unfortunately not, because as long as somebody is holding a non-European passport, the 90 days applied to them as well. So they need to keep that rule.
Okay, and so if I did want to travel for more than 90 days with my spouse, who's an EU citizen, does that mean I still need to apply for a visa then?
Well, we need to make a difference between if you are married to a European or if you are married to a French citizen. So if you are married to a European citizen, then basically the general rule is that you can come with the 90-day option. And then within that 90 days, once you have arrived to France, you will need to apply at the local authorities, which called préfecture, for your EU spouse residency permit. If you are, however, married to a French citizen, unfortunately, first thing is that you will have to apply for the right type of visa. And then with the visa, you come to France, and then you will be able to change it into a residency permit and stay longer. The reason why I'm using the word residency permit, if I can add it in here, it's simply because a lot of time people think that I come with the visa, and then here in France, I just renew my visa. Here in France, we don't renew visas. When you have the right type of permit, for example, so you are an EU spouse or a French spouse, then it's the residency permit that is going to be applicable to you later on.
Right, okay, and that residency permit is the carte de séjour, as it's called in French.
There is two names to it. One is titre de séjour and the other one is carte de séjour. Basically, the main difference is that one is temporary, so it means that renewable every single year until you reach 5 years. And then once you have reached 5 years of being here in France, then you go for the permanent residency permit, and then you get the carte de séjour.
Okay, that makes sense. And so what about if, I'm going to pick your brains on this whilst I have you, because I do get so many questions on these. What about if somebody wants to travel with their EU spouse, but they just want to come on a temporary visa, for example, they want to come for 6 months. Do they need a visa for that as well?
Yeah, so if they really only planning to stay for 6 months, then it would be good to come with the visa, because if you're a EU spouse, you only have that 90-day window of opportunity to stay in France without any further allowances. So then, yes, the 6 months long visa would be definitely a good option to go for.
Okay, and I did notice when you do, we'll talk about the application process later, but when you do apply for it, you can select if you're traveling with an EU spouse or something like that.
Absolutely. In the application form, there are different categories. It can be a little bit confusing. So that's why sometimes a handholder company like ours can be quite handy, actually. But yes, you can select the right category. There, it gives you a roll down list, and you will be able to select the right one.
And do you know, is it a different price for an EU spouse, or is it free? I've heard that some of the visas are free. Is that correct?
So visas are in general not free, even not for children. The visa, and doesn't matter if it's from the US or from the UK, the equivalent price is basically €99 for the visa, and that's always something that you pay as per person at the visa center once you are at the interview. So the visas are general, unfortunately, not free.
Okay, even for an EU, for like
even so. The only thing which can be free, for example, if you're an EU spouse or a French spouse and you come to France and you apply for the residency permit after the 90 days of being here, then the residency permit is something that can be free. But the visa itself, it's still €99 for everyone.
Right, okay, I was not aware of that, so thank you for clarifying. Okay, I'm just checking my questions. Okay, what about family members so family members of an EU, for example, I had somebody write in saying they wanted to join their son in France or their parents in France. Is this a possibility?
Well, in certain conditions, yes. So there is a possibility of a family reunification, but usually how it goes is that you really have to have a good reason. So just because, for example, my son is living in France, it's not always going that way. However, if the parents are living in France and the child would like to join, that's a different scenario. What often we get, actually, because that's something, it's a quite common scenario, is that, for example, the child comes to study here in France, and because they get accepted and they are minor, that in that case, yes, the family reunification absolutely can work, as you will need to accompany your minor child, obviously, here in France.
Okay, so that's definitely an area. I did have a few people send messages in about that, and I think that's something they probably should get more expert advice on, maybe get in touch with you directly and
absolutely
discuss that more. Okay, another thing that has come up quite a few times is it possible for a second homeowner in France to apply for a long stay visitor visa and then a carte de séjour visitor without actually becoming a permanent resident in France? So essentially they are applying for this carte de séjour and then they're using it to go back and forth between their second home and their home in the UK or in the US without becoming a resident. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, I know that a lot of people are doing it, whether if it's compliant with the rules and regulations, not necessarily. So when you're actually having a secondary home here in France, something that is important to know that already at the visa center, when you're applying for your visa, you will need to actually tick a box, which is saying that France is becoming your primary residency. Once France is becoming your primary residency, then there are certain rules and regulations that you have to follow. Again, we're going back to the famous taxation, French social security, and so on and so on. So maybe it's not in the first year when the authorities are going to find you, but it's worse to do the things in the legal way. So for secondary homeowners, really the best advice would be to try to use the 6 months long visa. And then for those who are really planning to settle in here in France, then go for the 1 year long visa itself.
Yeah, okay, that's really good advice, because I know there are quite a few people who are doing that, but yeah, you do need to be really careful if you're declaring that you are resident in a country and you're not resident in a country, we can all see the potential problems that could come up with that. And while we're on that subject, I'm actually just going to quickly point out one thing as well about that 183-day rule, which just came into my head. Is I think a lot of people don't realize that that does actually apply to EU citizens and even French citizens who are no longer resident in France. So if you're, for example, your husband is a French citizen, but he lives in the UK and pays tax in the UK, and you travel to France with him, he shouldn't actually be staying in France more than 6 months either without being resident in France and potentially paying tax in France. So just to clarify that, because I think there's a lot of confusion over those details. Right, we're going to have a little look at the Q&A. I can see quite a lot of you have put questions, and I'll see if we've got any questions live that we can answer. Laurie says, if I get a temporary long stay visa for 6 months, yeah, okay, so we have replied to that one. Let's go to the open ones. Financial eligibility requirements. Okay, we're going to get onto some of these in just a second. Oh, this is a good one. Are wife and husband applicants for long stay visas considered separately or together? So do you file an application together, or do you file one each?
So basically, everybody needs to have their own visa. However, the application is set in a way that, for example, if the wife starts the application, in the end, she can add her husband to her application form, still need to fill out the separate one, but at least it's considered together, which will allow them to go for an interview together. But in the end, everybody have their own number, the visa number, and everybody going to have their own respective visa in their passport.
Okay, great. And Maya says, I'm a US and a Swiss citizen. Do I need a visa as a Swiss citizen? So I'm assuming the question here really is, if you've got dual citizenship, can you just use your EU citizenship? I assume you can.
Yes, absolutely. So if you are within the European Economic Area, or you are having a European passport, then obviously that overrides your non-European one.
Yeah, I imagine you just need to make sure you use your Swiss passport when you arrive, rather than your
please
US.
travel with that one, so that would make it easier.
Okay, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this one, but it's an interesting one. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet, actually, but you do need an address in France, right, in order to apply for a visa. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So that's also something that important to know before actually jumping onto any type of visa application, is that you will have to have an address. Now, a lot of people are kind of feel like, yes, but I don't know if I'm going to have my visa, so then why am I going to buy or rent something in advance? It is actually, unfortunately, a risk that everybody has to take. So first, either you rent or you purchase, or if you have family members or friends that you can stay with, those are the 3 options that can provide you with an address. And then after, you can apply for the visa itself.
Okay, and so John says, and I'm not sure if you will know the answer to this, but we'll see. I have the opportunity he says, will a static caravan on, I assume, a mobile home park or something like that, would that kind of address be sufficient for a visa application?
Actually, it's a really good question, and we get it a lot. So if the park itself is registered and the park owner is happy to give you a certificate that you are actually a long-term rent, you're having a long-term rent in the caravan park, then yes, you can use that. If it's only a short-term rent and you cannot use the address per se, because they don't provide you with the address, then unfortunately you can't. You will have to have a certificate from the owner of the park to be able to do that.
Okay, so it sounds like with most things in France, if you've got the right paperwork, it might be okay. But if you don't have the right paperwork, maybe not.
Exactly, and that's also usually when you know, experts like FrenchEntrée or French Connection HCB can be very helpful, because we are very often checking with the authorities. So we try to, and hopefully we have the latest rules and regulations in our knowledge in terms of the paperwork, what you will need to have. So when that's something that we usually say, and I'm sorry about that, but please don't base your move on social media. Social media is great for so many other things, but when actually it is your future life and your future home here in France, try to really use the official websites or the experts who can guide you through the whole process, because here in France, every region has their own rules and regulations. Therefore, everybody's situation is different, actually. So when you go on social media and you read something that worked for someone, it just might not going to work for you.
Yeah, that is really good advice. Social media can be great just for getting people's opinions and their little anecdotes and things like that. But when it comes to the official advice, yeah, do go to the official sources, because it is very important. Right, we'll take a quick break to do a poll, and we'll let Diana have a quick sip of water or a breather. And I'm going to put the first of our polls up on the screen now. So should be able to see that one now. So an easy question: what is your main reason for wanting to move to France or apply for a French visa? To work or to set up a business? To join a French or EU spouse or family member, as we were just talking about? To study? To retire to France, either now or in the future? Or perhaps you want to spend more time at your second home in France? Or you simply want to travel in France for an extended period. So those last two, you're not really looking to move to France, but yeah. So I'll give you, you're answering very quickly, but I will give you a few more seconds to answer that. And then I will share the results with you. I'm nearly there. Looks like all of you have almost answered. We're getting lots and lots of questions and answers in, by the way. So if we don't get to them all, I hope we will cover all the subjects that you are asking questions about. But if we don't get to them all, we will go through all of these afterwards and make sure that any that we haven't covered, we do get in touch with you. Right, I'm going to end that poll there, and I will put the results up on the screen for you. So the majority of people are looking to retire to France, either soon or in the future. A lot of you, looks like you're second homeowners that are wanting to spend more time at your second home. Again, not much of a surprise, as we obviously have a lot of second homeowners. To work or set up a business. None of you looking to study in France, and some of you just wanting to travel. So, well, thank you for taking part in that. Right, I'm going to stop sharing that. And we'll go back to some questions. We're going to move on to becoming resident in France now and take a look at that. So Diana, first of all, can you briefly explain the steps that a non-EU citizen has to take if they want to move to France and become resident in France?
Absolutely, but everything starts with the right questions to ask from yourself, I think. So one of the first important questions is that what would you like to be doing here in France? The reason why it's important to ask, because we all, when we travel and we like a country and then we fall under its charm or its wine and cheeses, then it's very actually easy to feel like, okay, this is going to be my future home and I will just figure out what I'm going to be doing here in France. As you will need to have a visa, you will have to have a proper plan what you would like to be doing here. So please ask the first question, what you would be like to doing in the first year at least. Then the second thing, as we already talked about, that you will need to have an address here in France. And the third thing, which is quite important, apart from many other things, obviously, but you will also need to have the right type of health insurance and health cover here in France. So to be able to be a resident, obviously, if you are meeting the requirement, you will be able to integrate into the French social security system. But until you are not, in any case, it's the requirement of the visa application itself. It's good to be covered because, well, for those who are coming from the US, they will find it a little bit cheap, but those who are coming from the UK are going to find it absolutely overpriced. So you just have to make sure that you are being covered on that one. And then once you are here in France, because you had the right type of visa, and that is the right type of visa, which is usually this 1 year long visa that allows you to become a resident here in France, the steps are actually relatively easy. So 2 months before your long stay visitor visa or any other type of visa that you came with for 1 year allows you to change it into residency permit. So 2 months before it's expiring at your local authorities, this famous préfecture, you will be able to change it into a residency permit. So the good news is that you don't have to go back to the UK or to the US. You can do it from here in France. The residency permit is actually provided for 1 year and it's renewable. So every year you are going to renew it until you're going to reach 5 years. Once you have reached 5 years, you're going to have different options, very be free. You will be able to apply for a 5-year, a 10-year long residency. For the 10-year, you will need to have a French language test. But honestly speaking, if you have been spending 5 years already here in France, and if you cannot pass a basic French language test, there is a little bit of a problem, I guess. And then the other third option is going to be, while you have a residency permit running, that actually you will be also able to apply for the French nationality if you would like to. So basically, ask the right questions, get the right visa, and then after you will be able to turn it into a residency permit.
Okay, so just to confirm that, so we start with a long stay visa. And then do we have to validate that when we come to France? Is that?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So if we are looking at the visa part and not the residency, so basically how the visa itself goes. The visa application starts online. You will need to go to the French government visa application website. Then after, you will need to select a visa center. For those who are living in the UK, you are looking at, it's called TLS Contact. And for those who are, for example, living in the US or any other parts of outside of UK, then they need to go to the VFS Global Visa Centers. You will find the list of the visa centers nearest to you. The only tiny anecdote that I would put in there, if I may, is that you have to make sure that you are choosing the closest one and within your own country, because as they are representing in different countries as well, it's very easy to, for example, end up in Singapore having an appointment. Really beautiful, but it's going to be very costly just to have a visa appointment to come to France. So please make sure that you are on the right website that is corresponding to your location. So once you actually have the visa appointment, also something important to know that they're going to take away your passport. So it's usually for 15 to 20 working days, because a lot of people are asking that okay, I will just do the appointment, I come back to France, and then after I will collect my passport. I mean, I will, get the visa. Actually, they're taking away your passport. So please make sure that you are aware of that you will be staying for at least 3 weeks without passport. And then once you are here in France, within the first 2-3 months, I always say 2 just to make sure, but usually actually have 3 months, you will need to get this visa validated. It's also an online process. It is a bit costly. And here comes again social media. On social media, a lot of people are saying, don't pay it, it's 200 euros. Please do, because if you don't, as Zoe was saying, you will not have the chance to turn it into residency permit. It also comes with a mandatory medical checkup. That medical checkup has nothing to do with French social security. It's really part of the visa validation itself as well. And it's usually called the Office of Immigration and Integration, which really makes a lot of people afraid. Don't be. It's absolutely easy. It's really just part of that process. So then once that visa is validated, then yes, thank you very much, Zoe. That's how you will be able to turn it into residency once your visa is expiring.
Okay, right. So we get the long stay visa, we validate it after 2 to 3 months in France. Then 2 months before the end of the visa, we can apply for our carte de séjour, our residency card. And then we renew that every year until we get to 5 years. And then we can get that permanent residency card.
100%
Easy,
correct.
right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
So I'll just remind everybody whilst we're here, we are recording this. So I know this is a lot of information coming at you. So don't worry, it will be available to stream for free on our YouTube channel. So you can go back, you can listen to it and re-listen to it and make some notes and get all of those tips and tricks that Diana has shared with us. Okay, let me move on to the next question. Okay, so going back to that long stay visa. So that's the first step of becoming resident of France. Now, I know there's a lot of different types of long stay visa available. Can you just say briefly some of the options that are available and what is the most typical one that people might be applying for?
Absolutely. As going back to the origin of what are you planning to do here in France? So everyone who are not planning to work in France, meaning that they are not planning to receive salary from France, or they are planning to retire in France, the easiest option is the long stay visitor visa. That's for 1 year. Those who are planning to work in France, then they will need to have a business type of visa. There are so many different options to it. So you will really need to know if you are setting up a company, you're bringing over your company, your company is actually going to relocate you in here. So for that, you will have different options. Because it's quite complicated, it is actually also good to have a barrister, a lawyer who is helping you with any business type of applications. So for example, our company as well, we are working with a lawyer firm simply because it requires a lot of legal documentation to be able to receive that type of visa. There is one good thing also about the long stay visitor visa, for the most simple one in that sense is that, for example, those people who are working in the UK or in the US and the company is happy for them to do it remotely from France, as long as they are not having an office in here, as long as they are really working from the comfort of their home and armchair, they are not meeting any clients here in France and they are not receiving any salary here in France, then they can use this long stay visitor visa. The catch to it, though, because there is always a catch with everything, is that, okay, you can have the easy visa, you can still continue to work for your company outside of France. However, you won't be able to integrate into the French social security system until you are doing, because you cannot be associated with two social security systems actually in two different countries. So because your work is actually paying all the social charges after you're already at your respective country, that's the catch to it, that you will still going on, or you will still being on a private health insurance.
Okay, that's really good to know, because I did have quite a lot of questions about remote working. So you can potentially remote work whilst you're on a visitor visa, as long as all the work is done outside of the country. But like Diana just mentioned, yeah, there could be that issue with healthcare. What about working as a freelancer? For example, if you're a freelancer and all of your clients are outside of France, is that possible, or would you still need to set up as a business in France to do that?
Well, it depends. I mean, every freelancer needs to be registered for taxation somewhere. So I assume even if it's a freelancer, let it be UK or US, if you are registered in those countries, you can do it as long as you don't have clients here in France. However, if you would like to set yourself up as a freelancer here in France, you can do that. You will just need to have an entrepreneur type of visa, which is falling under the business visa type of categories. It's setting yourself up as what we call a micro-entrepreneur here in France, which is sort of like the equivalent of the freelancer. It's really not a very complicated process, but you have to make sure that that's the best what is corresponding to your situation. That's all.
Yeah, okay. So I think the overall advice for anybody that is looking to get a business visa or a work visa outside of just having being offered a job in France, for example, you really probably do need to have an appointment with somebody like Diana and really go into that in more depth before you launch into that. Okay, what about if I start off with one visa type? For example, I come on a visitor visa and then I want to change it so that I can work, for example. Is that possible, or would I have to leave and start the whole process again?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, no. So when you come with one type of visa, you can change it into, again, for a right type of residency permit once it comes to its end. So for example, if you come as a visitor, once the visitor visa is expiring, and you can change your status from visitor to business owner, for example, and then get the right type of residency matching that allows you to work. While you are in the middle of your long stay visitor visa, and let's say, for example, you find a job, the thing is that the company that is happy to hire you, first you will need to have a work permit. For that, you have to have the right type of status. So again, you need to go for the status change, get the work permit, and then everything else. By the time it goes through, actually your 1 year long visa already expiring anyway. So it's really honestly much better to wait until the visa comes to its expiration and then change your status in that moment.
Okay, but it is possible when the visa runs out, potentially.
When the visa runs, yes, when the visa runs out, it's absolutely. You just have to ask for first a status change, and then after apply for the right type of residency, which goes with your new status. And it's all happening with the prefecture itself as well.
Okay, that's good to know. That's some options there for people if they come on that visitor visa and decide they do want to work later on. What about France's talent passport scheme? I've heard quite a lot about this. We won't go into great detail on it, but what kind of applicants might be considered for that?
So the talent passport is actually very appealing, because the first thing what people see when they read about it is that it gives you access for 4 years residency in France. However, there is also, let's be honest with one another, talent passport doesn't mean that just because I can take pictures and I consider them very nice, that I will be eligible for that one. But unfortunately, what it means is that usually everybody needs to hold a master's degree minimum, that they will need to contribute to the greater and betterness of France with the job that they are actually planning to do in here. So people who are coming with a talent passport, usually those who are working for a company and that company already has a subsidiary here in France, and what they put in place as processes is something essential for the office here in France as well. Or someone who actually really put down amazing achievements throughout the previous years, released several books, for example, and then they coming to France to research for the next book, and the book is going to be around France, for example. The good side to a talent passport that you can bring your family along as well, and they will have the same rights as you, but it's only lasts for 4 years. And the downside to it, that it's extremely difficult to get it. Less than 20% of the applications are being accepted, generally speaking.
Right. Okay. So that might not be the easy option people are thinking it could be. Okay. Right. I'm going to have a quick look at some of the live questions. We have lots of them. I do think we have covered a lot of these subjects. So I'll see if I can find some that we haven't covered. This one could be a quick one. I've read that once you arrive in France with a 6-month visa, you still have to register. Oh, do you need to register? If you come with a 6-month, a temporary visa to France, do you have to validate that on arrival?
No, you don't.
Okay.
So actually, there's one thing to add. Thank you very much for asking about the validation question, because we already talked about it. You have to. So for 6 months long visas, you don't have to. And for children under 18 years old, you also don't have to validate their visas.
And do you know how much it is? Because he's saying it was an extra cost of 250 euros.
So the visa validation is precisely 200 euro, actually.
Okay, so that is something people need to factor into the cost. You will need to pay that, but not on that temporary one, only on the long stay one.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm just going through some of these, see if we can find. Oh yeah, I wonder if you know. Is a PAX counted as the same as being married in France for visa purposes? If you're...
So yes and no. So that's actually something that recently starting to become more and more as a problem. In previous years, if you are PAXed or in a civil partnership with someone else, so because PAX is a civil partnership in any other countries, then it actually allowed you to have a spouse visa and then after have a spouse residency. In the recent years, actually, France is starting to say no to that. And they are really allowing those people who are effectively married to go through the process as EU spouses or French spouses, actually.
Okay. And a question on, we've already said that you need to have an address in order to apply for a long stay visa in France. Firstly, do you need an address for a temporary long stay visa?
Yes, so anything which is not a 90-day, in a sense, you will need to have an address here in France. The difference between a 1-year-long visa and a 6 months long, so a temporary visa itself, is that for a temporary one, it can be a hotel, it can be an Airbnb, and also there is another difference in terms of private health insurance. You can also, just use, like, for example, a travel insurance, or if you are coming from the UK, you can also use a global health insurance card. Whereas for the 1-year-long visa, you need to have a long-term contract, or, as I mentioned already, owning your own house. And you also have to have private health insurance accompanying you through the whole duration of the year. So for 6 months, you can just come as a tourist. It really can be a tourist visa.
And another question that somebody's asking is, for this address, could it be a friend's address or a family member's address, for example? Is there a possibility to do that in France?
Absolutely. I think we already mentioned somewhere in the beginning. So yes, absolutely. You can use a friend or family member's address. What you will need is actually, it's called an accommodation certificate. It's a document that can be downloaded from the internet itself as well, accompanied by the passport of your family member or friend who are actually happy to have you at their home, and also utility bills under their name. And then you can absolutely use it. Something important, however, with that is that they are actually taking the responsibility for you here in France. So it shouldn't be really taken lightly as well. It's not like just, okay, I'm going to call my old college buddy and then can he give me an address? It comes with certain type of responsibilities from the person who is hosting you. So it should be really chosen as an option when it's really someone very, very close to you, or really your family member. Otherwise, renting would be a better option.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think you have mentioned this, but just to clarify, At what point do you need to pass a French language test for your residency card?
So actually, for visa, you don't have to. So that's a good news. A lot of people are actually asking us if I have to. No, you don't. So that's a good thing. You will need to pass a French language test once you are actually been here in France for 5 years and you're going for your permanent residency permit, but not the one which is valid for 5 years, the one which is valid for 10 years. And you will have to pass a basic French language test. So honestly, if you go to buy every morning your croissant and baguette, and just talking to your neighbors, I'm pretty sure you will be able to do that.
Great. Okay. So that's good to know. So you've got 5 years, guys. Don't worry. Okay, let's move on to some questions about visa applications and eligibility. Now, we have covered a few of these things already, but we'll just go into a little bit more detail. I think we've already gone over a quick overview of how to apply for the French visa, but what kind of paperwork would you be expected to provide for the typical long stay visitor visa, for example?
Absolutely. So it all starts with your passport. It sounds funny, but it's quite important because you have to make sure that your passport has been issued less than 10 years ago, and it's going to be valid at least for a year after the planned moving date. Now, talking about planned moving date, as I already, I think, mentioned, if I not, then it's the right opportunity to do so. You will need to choose a moving date before actually you are applying for the visa itself as well. So you will have to set a date, and then you count back from that date. You can start a visa application 3 months prior that moving date itself, actually. So then after going to the documentation, you get the passport sorted. You will need to have ID pictures, passport pictures. A lot of people say like, oh, it's nothing. Actually, one of the highest reasons why visas are being declined is because the passport picture is not, or the ID picture is not corresponding to the requirements. The requirements are relatively simple. Basically, your face has to occupy 80% of the picture. You have to have a light background. For those who are living in the UK, you cannot smile, unfortunately. For those who are living in the US, however, they need to have the ears shown. So there is a tiny bit of a difference. And if you're not meeting those requirements, unfortunately, either they're going to send you to retake your picture, or they can tell you that you're not going to get the visa. So don't take it lightly. Then after you will, yeah, exactly.
Very specific.
Then after you will need to have, obviously, as we already talked about, the private health insurance going on for you. You will need to have the proof that you have the accommodation, so accommodation certificate, rental, long renting, or having an address here in France. You will also need to prove sufficient funds. Sufficient funds is always an important question, and always people like to debate on it, simply because officially there is no minimum that the authorities are putting really out there. However, from experience, and personally I've been doing this for 14 years with French Connections over 3 years, trust us on that you will need to show at least the minimum of the minimum French wage. The minimum French wage is actually 19,000 euro. I know it sounds for a lot of people a lot, but if you cannot show that one, the authority is very likely going to decline your application. And yes, it is per person.
Right. Okay. Because that was the question I was going to ask. If it's a couple, they don't take into account that?
Honestly, the more you can show, the better it is. So if you really want to be on the safe side, please try to show that amount. That would be really good if you can. Then after, obviously, something that's always we are having as a question, you can use any bank account. So it doesn't have to be a French bank account, which can also help a little bit in that sense. And then on top of these documents, you will need to have a lot of self-declaration as well. You will need to declare that you are not planning to work in France. You will also need to declare your socioeconomic situation on the day when you are applying to France. So those are the generic documents that actually you will need. If it's confusing or if you get lost about it, then you can ask Zoe or you can ask me, and then we are very happy to guide you forward.
Yeah, well, I think anybody that's been through the process of moving to France knows there is a lot of paperwork, and it starts from the get-go. So going back to this sufficient funds, because I know that these are questions that we get asked all the time. So firstly, you said that it is based on the SMIC, or the minimum wage in France. So I do actually have the latest figures, because it's just gone up again with inflation. So at the moment, the monthly SMIC amount gross is 1,678 or 79, I'll round it up. with the net amount at 1,329. So that is quite a substantial amount that you'd need to show. Can this be, does this have to be income or pension income? Can this be savings, investments, rental income?
Absolutely. So it doesn't have to be physical income itself. It can come from rental. It can come from pension. It can come from state pension, early retirement statements. It can come from any savings that you actually have been doing over the years. So it doesn't, and also it doesn't have to be on the same bank account. So you can show different bank accounts proving that you have the totality of that amount for you.
Okay, so that's reassuring to know. And what about if you own a property in France? Is that going to help you get a visa? Is it going to mean that sufficient funds will be less? Is there any benefit to that?
Well, I mean, yes and no. First of all, you have an address, yay, so you don't have to worry about that. But in terms of funds, unfortunately, they are not taking into consideration how much your property worth. So you still have to prove that. But they actually are more open to those applicants who already have a home here in France.
Okay, so yeah, it could be a bit of a benefit, but it's not going to.
It's a bit of a benefit, but not from a financial point of view, no.
Okay, that's good to know. So looking at the health insurance requirements, that you've already mentioned this a little bit, so we won't go over that too much. One thing, can British retirees still get an S1 form? And is that accepted for moving to France for a visa?
Yes, absolutely. So British retirees can absolutely, but it's very important when we're talking about retirement, it's full state pension retirement, so not early retirement. So you have to receive state pension to be able to receive this S1 form. The S1 form can be requested from the NHS overseas offices, just for information for those who are coming from the UK. And yes, you can use it for the visa application. However, it doesn't cover you as a private health insurance. So it's also something good to know about, that while you are on that S1, you are not covered in France. I hope nothing is going to happen to anyone, but you need to know that. So actually a lot of people, even though they have the S1 form, once they are in France, they are going for any type of insurance just to cover themselves until they can get into the French social security system.
Okay. Right. Let me get my questions up again. I think we've answered quite a lot.
I feel like I'm confusing you completely.
Well, as I said to everybody before, we are recording this, so please do go and watch it back. We are, I'm trying to make the most of having Diana here and putting all of my questions to her and all of your questions to her, but there is a lot of information and we're cramming it all into an hour. So please do go back and re-listen to this, and all the information hopefully will be in there and you can make some notes. Okay, so we've covered the long stay visas. So the next step to getting residency is a carte de séjour. And one of the questions I do get asked quite a lot is people are worried that they may not be accepted for a carte de séjour, that they may not get residency. So if somebody comes and they get accepted for a long stay visa and their situation doesn't change, are they guaranteed to get a carte de séjour at the end of that? Or is there anything else that they need to be aware of?
Well, first and most important thing, that nothing is 100% sure in France when it comes to administration. And I'm very serious about it. So please be aware of that. There is always going to be a chance, for whatever reasons, the person didn't have a coffee in the morning or anything, that actually your file can be refused. But if your situation didn't change, just actually evolved, you're already starting to get the integration into the French system, for example, during the first year, then obviously there is no real risk why your residency application should be not accepted.
Okay, so that is reassuring to know. And what about another question I've had quite a few people writing about, if I have a permanent French residency card or a withdrawal agreement card, that for US citizens, that is the card that British citizens after Brexit got in France. What happens if I want to move back to my home country or spend a longer period abroad? So in other words, is there a minimum amount of time that I need to be in France to maintain my French residency?
So in terms of once you received your if you are from the UK and you have this famous Brexit residency, withdrawal residency card, it would be great if at least you stayed here for at least a year, please. And then after planning to go somewhere else. Once you are planning to go somewhere else, because, you know, life can happen, you need to go back to be with your family, or your partner got an exciting job offer somewhere else, or even your child got accepted to a really good university somewhere else, then yes, of course, you can leave France. There is always good thing to, or the good thing to do, or right thing to do, is to contact your local authority, again, prefecture. They will be the one who are going to let you know for how long you can be away. It usually varies between 1 and 2 years. And like within that period of time, you are not losing your residency permit. But please check with your local authorities, because they will be the fit person to tell you exactly how long you can go away.
Okay, that's good to know, at least that there are options there available.
Yes.
Okay, right. We're going to see if we can get through a few live questions before we wrap up. We've only got 5 minutes left. Let me have a quick look. Okay, this one. Do you need, right? So if you come to France on a long stay visa and then you're applying for your residency card, do you need to keep renewing your health insurance policy every year until you get to that 5 years, or can you get into the French system?
If you got into the French system, yes. So if you're eligible after 3 months of being here in France with the long stay visa, you are eligible to get into the French social security system. At least you have the right to get into, but you have to make sure you're really meeting all the requirements. If you do, then you don't have to. Once you get this social security number, you will be able to obviously use that, and you don't need to have a private health insurance. If you chose not to integrate into the French social security, then yes, you will need to keep renewing your private health insurance here in France.
Okay, so it's one or the other. Either you are able to get into the French social security system, or you've got to keep providing that.
Yes.
Okay. A question on, we did touch on this, but there's a medical that you need to do a medical before you apply for your carte de séjour. What does that entail?
You mean like the medical test that when you're validating your visa? Yes, so with the Office of Immigration and Integration. Basically, it's a chest X-ray and some blood work. And they are providing you an appointment. You can book an appointment yourself for the nearest medical centers, and normally they are covering the cost as well.
Okay, so that's nothing to be too worried about for people. Do they, I don't know if you know this, do they refuse people based on the results of that?
Not really. And to be honest with you, it doesn't happen immediately either. So you're already going to be living in France for a couple of months before actually you are going to go for your X-ray.
Okay. They're not going to kick you out straight away. Okay, so don't panic about that. Those of you that are asking about the medical. A couple of questions as well coming in about, this is a big subject, so we won't go into it in too much detail, but about becoming a French citizen or a French national. Becoming a French citizen. So at what point can you become a French citizen? And is this something that's possible for everybody?
Yes, absolutely. In a sense, if you're again meeting the requirement, that's something very important in here in France, meeting requirements. If you have been living in France for 5 years and also been paying taxes here in France for 5 years, then you are eligible to request a French nationality or French citizenship. If you are married to a French national and after 3 years you have been living in this country, you can actually request a French nationality. If you have been a student in any master program, for example, fully taught in French, once you have finished with your program, then you will be able to request the nationality application. So there are different options. It sounds very easy. Obviously, just like everything, there is massive subcategories as well. So it's just a general thing. But if you actually really interested to do that, please consult us so that we can get into the right details with you.
Great. Okay. Right. We're going to wrap things up there because we are running out of time. So thank you so much to all of you that attended today. And a massive thank you once again to Diana for giving up her time and answering all our many, many, many questions. If we didn't get around to your question today, we will make sure that we forward them on to Diana. And if you do have any additional questions or you want to get in touch with French Connections HCB, you can email us at webinar@FrenchEntrée.com. If you enjoyed today's webinar, keep an eye out for more FrenchEntrée webinars over the coming months. If you're joining us today from the United States, you may be interested in our next webinar, which is Buying Property in France for Americans. This will be held on the 8th of November at 12 p.m., so midday Eastern time. and it will be entirely focused on our American audience. The details are up on the FrenchEntrée website right now, so you can go over and sign up. And while you're there, you can also get your free tickets for our French property exhibition held in London in January. And finally, do let us know what you thought of today's webinar, what topics you'd like to see us cover in upcoming webinars. You can drop us an email at webinar@FrenchEntrée.com. Thank you once again to everyone for attending. Thank you one more time to Diana, and I'll hopefully see you all on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.